Go.
So when you see the sheep heart, like the first thing you want to do is you want to see the heart as kind of like 4 different sections. So you have the superior of the heart, which is basically everything on the top where all the vessels run and connect to the lungs and the aorta and the arteries and stuff. And you have the inferior of the heart, which is everything else of the heart that connects at that apex at the bottom. And the anterior side is here. You can see that this is the anterior side which is basically the front side, because you can see the 2 different ventricles. Here you can see the right ventricle here because there's a little divot, so that's where it caved in. And here you have the left ventricle that you can see. And as for the atrium, you can see the right atrium is around here, and the left atrium would be right around here. You can see that more when we cut into the frontal plane and went inside, but those are roughly where the different 4 chambers are of the heart.
This is the right side. Okay, so wait, now me. Okay, so now we're gonna get into the different muscular parts of the heart, both external and internal structures. So before the dissection, they removed the sac that held the heart and all of the big blood vessels. So that was removed for this dissection. It's called the pericardium. And then if you open up the heart, so I'm going to show you the 3 different muscular internal parts of the heart. So this lining right here, this boundary between the dark and the light, that is the epicardium. And then this part right here is called the myocardium. And then this shinier part near the chordae tendineae and the papillary muscles, that is called the endocardium. And we'll get more into that when we go into the blood flow. Is the superior vena cava. Right here.
Okay, so how the blood flow works is that blood will first come in through the superior vena cava and into the right atrium. It will then pass through the tricuspid valve.
Yeah, so the tricuspid valve is kind of like, we can see there's one here, and sort of one here. And when we were cutting in to the superior vena cava, we kind of cut the tricuspid valve, but you can see like where it could have been. But here's where the other bicuspid valve, you can kind of see where that is, and that's kind of what the tricuspid valve would have looked like.
Okay, from the right atrium, the blood will then flow into the right ventricle, and then from there it will flow up through the pulmonary vein. Pulmonary vein on the top. Then in the pulmonary vein, at the base between the ventricle and the vein itself, you can't see it, but there's a pulmonary semilunar valve, which is 2 flaps that open and close to prevent backflow. The blood will then the blood will flow through the valve across the trunk and out to the lungs.
And within the trunk is the pulmonary artery, which carries that blood out.
Then from the lungs, the blood will flow back through the pulmonary artery.
That's what I meant. Sorry. We're good.
Okay.
Keep going.
Do the
From the
aortic semilunar.
No, I'm gonna get to that in a minute. From the we're good. From the lungs, blood will flow in through the pulmonary artery into the left atrium. From there, it'll go through the bicuspid valve.
Yeah. So the bicuspid valve is this valve right here. You can kind of see that it's like attached to the chordae tendineae. And the chordae tendineae are these like little fibrous like things that are also attached to the papillary muscle right here. And with this, like this is the one that shuts close when the blood is going between the atrium and the left atrium and the left ventricle. And those are like all like held together. They're like kind of strong. And you can see like the different fibers like all around here.
From there, the blood will then flow into the left ventricle, which is much bigger because it has the job of pumping blood to the rest of the body. From the left ventricle, it will then go past the aortic semilunar valve, which is another 2 flaps that open and close to prevent backflow. It will then go through the aorta up through the trunk and out through the aortic arch, which is cut off here.
You talked about the inferior vena cava. Okay, and then auricle.
This side.
Okay, and then these are the auricles. So there's one here and there's one here, and what they are, they're basically extensions of the atrium. So they're sacs to allow for greater capacity. And the coronary sinus, as you can see, is hidden behind the fat that would run along.
It's on the posterior of the heart.
Yes, on the posterior of the heart, it'll run along the back and it carries the blood from the heart, and then it'll take it back into the atrium. Then the atrioventricular septum is this whole section here between the left and the right atrium and ventricles.
Yeah.
Then
We can't really see it like in action because we cut it when we cut along the frontal plane to get like the different chambers, but because it's like here, that's where that septum would be dividing the different ventricles and the atrium.
Then the interventricular septum is right here, which is still part of the atrioventricular septum, but it's specifically only between the ventricles. Then the coronary
Wait, that's you. Okay, go.
the coronary arteries, as you can see on the anterior side of the heart, run along the front, and that brings our blood to the heart muscles.
Yeah, you can kind of see the coronary artery when this line right here, which is kind of like in between, like where this the right ventricle is and the left ventricle is, these two chambers, and you can kind of see it running along the anterior side.
Okay, and then I need the veins, coronary veins.
Oh, yeah.
So then I wanted to talk about the coronary veins, which are also on the posterior side. Also on the posterior side of the heart. So there's three major ones that I wanted to talk about. So there's one big one that runs right along here. You can't really see it. There's a lot of fat on this heart, but it runs right along here. It's called the great cardiac vein. And then from there it extends down. See this vein right here? That is called the mid cardiac vein. And then there's a littler one right here called the small cardiac vein. And those have extensions as well of even smaller veins, but those are the three big ones that we should know about. Is that it? Did we get everything?